This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. My name is Brian. I'm your host today. Joining me this week, two robots in various states of disguise, Kara Shamborski.
Wah, 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 wah.
And Nick White.
I'm going to be one of the multiple ones that turns into a jet, because apparently that's a thing.
Yeah, why would you pick anything else, right, if Jet is on the table?
I'd like to think that one of them picked Jet and the other one was like secretly thinking Jet, and he's like, fuck, I want Jet. You know what? Jet.
Brian, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, if you haven't put the clues together yet, today we're going to be talking about Transformers Volume 1, Robots in Disguise. This is the Energon Universe series, written by Daniel Warren Johnson, with art by Daniel Warren Johnson and Mike Spicer. In this series, the Transformers are finally joining the Energon universe, which, I would hope so, right? Isn't Transformers where that came from?
Exactly. Good read. So we're coming into this topic at different levels of awareness. I'm coming in as the Transformers fan. Nick had read everything else in the Energon universe, and Brian is here for a good time with robots.
I'm enthusiastic about big robots.
And full spoilers for Transformers Volume 1. And let me just say to all our listeners that Nick White is currently your favorite person, because him being on this show prevents it from it being me and Brian turning it into robots I'd like to fuck.
So yeah, I'm the bad guy, apparently. Let's set the stage.
But feel free to email Mike about our Patreon if that's a series you would like us to get into. I mean, there's not a lot I won't talk about for $5 a month.
I'm worried that show basically writes itself.
For those of, if this is not video clipped, I'm turning tomato red right now, people. This is all right. So let's get into it. So I'm going to start us off because I have actually seen the first half of first season of Transformers G1, which is the series that this comic book is based off of. And the opening arc of this comic is basically the start of the Transformers G1 TV show, but way more bloody and adult, because in the 80s, the cartoon existed to sell children plastic toys, and now the people who grew up watching that cartoon are making the comic book and asking the question, but what if Starscream actually brutally murdered humans everywhere he went?
What if his first action in the book was to shoot Bumblebee in the face?
It's really, really
just
aggressive.
Opens on him doming Bumblebee, and I'm like, okay, that's the tone for this book set.
It's the tone for this book. So it's in a standard Transformers G1 episode, it's Autobots versus Decepticons, and they're on Earth, and they're trying to get Energon, which is their energy source, and they do that by extracting various Earth resources and turning those into Energon. So we're basically seeing a 30-minute episode of Transformers G1, but people die, robots die, and there's a lot of wrestling moves, which I was wondering about until I made the connection that this creative team also did do a powerbomb, and then I was like, this makes sense now. This is just their skill set coming to the fore.
I had seen the Optimus Prime steps on a deer panel online before, and I thought it was a joke. I didn't think that was a real thing in a comic book. But yeah, he's just out for a walk, and then you just hear a wet crunch, and he looks down, and there's just this flat deer.
Okay, out of context, I can see why that would be funny, but that panel made me start to tear up. There were 5 or 6 different times during this run where I was just why am I crying? And there's this really good use of these humanistic emotional beats amid all of the suplexing and so forth that grounds the series in a kind of humanity. And when you see that panel within the context of Optimus Prime discovering the beauty of Earth and realizing that his body is going to hurt things just by being there, it's really beautiful, okay?
Yeah, it's very interesting to see the Autobots and the Decepticons discovering the fragility of life on Earth and their very, very different reactions to it.
What kind of reactions, Brian?
Well, I think is it Starscream who just like straight crushes a guy?
Yep.
Yeah, I think not once, but actually twice.
Several times.
Yeah.
He's the one who opens fire on a hospital.
Yeah, it's part of the real nuance of the characters in this book. It's if you're someone who likes to think outside the good bad binary, and you want to, as a literary major, wants to deconstruct binary thinking, this might not be for you, because I think the only thing that's missing is that, like, they could have at least worn like respective jerseys, to just make it even more
That's
clear.
what their
like
symbols are, Nick. That's what the Autobot and Decepticon symbols are on their like little shoulders,
like,
and
which
wings.
It's like, who is that a reminder for, or is that just like a tattoo? I don't know. I guess, I think one of my overall issues with this book is that it feels like it can't decide what the tone of this book is. Is it melodramatic? Is it just for the lulz? High energy, belongs in like a 1980s cereal commercial where it's all sugar, but you're gonna convince people it isn't. I don't know. At some points, it reminds me of. I always go back to Arrested Development with the League of Magicians with the sign that says "We demand to be taken seriously." Like, I feel like this book has moments where it's like, we demand to be taken seriously, and the deer moment would definitely be one of those. But then it just does other just goofy ass shit where Optimus Prime is guns akimbo in the 6th issue, and like underneath him as he's firing away, I think it has word art which is meant to look like steel with rivets in it, and it says like, yeah, and I'm like,
I
what is
laughed
the
out
tone
loud.
of this? Yeah,
I laughed out loud
what
at
is
that
the
panel.
tone of this book?
The tone of
I
this
never
book
thought I'd say
is...
this, but part of me is like, if you were at least consistently grimdark, I would be like, okay, all right, let Optimus Prime say fuck. Maybe some of the Transformers fuck. Just a whole lot of.
I mean, Jazz definitely fucks.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that's a whole nother issue I have. Jazz just opens up I have a whole bunch of questions. Like, how does he know what jazz music is?
A question that I don't think is answered in Transformers G1. It's just Jazz is the one with the music stuff. And then
how do they know how to speak English?
We can say that it's part of it's part of Jetfire's telling Teletran 1 to reconstruct them into forms of Earth vehicles. And you assume that there's
okay. All right. I just wanted to know if that scene
in the comic book, Nick.
Right. Right. He says assign forms that blend in with the culture or whatever. Like, is that supposed to be the way out for everything?
Yes.
That doesn't make sense. Okay.
It's an 80s cartoon, Nick. It's selling you the toys.
Right. Well, I mean,
you want
I think
the various jets that transform into robots with various political affiliations.
Right. And I think, by and large, not to like poo-poo Transformers overall, but like, I feel like Transformers has always been in a difficult position to arrange the story it has, because the toys came first, and then they said, well, we have a robot that turns into a truck. Okay. Well, now you need to come up with a convincing reason for people to buy other robots that turn into other trucks. So when you start with a cart before the horse arrangement.
But in this arrangement, the cart and the horse are the same thing, and they just transform.
Right. Yeah.
Well played, Brian.
Yeah. But,
so The reason that we haven't really gotten into the plot of this volume is because we already shared the plot of this volume. The plot is the
Yes.
robots are fighting for resources and people die. And so what made this an interesting and riveting read for me is that it is like so clearly like grown up love letter to those original Transformers cartoons. So it's really interesting hearing Nick being like, this has a tone problem, because I'm too busy being blinded by oh my god, all these characters that I love. And I want to be clear here, I do not have childhood nostalgia for the Transformers. This is all college and older. Like, I have no excuse.
I was gonna
like,
say, is that better? Is that worse?
it might be worse. I don't, because I made these choices as an adult. I don't have
Right.
like nebulous childhood memories. I'm just
My
like,
brain was fully formed.
my brain was fully formed when I decided to go all in on the Transformers. But
Mom
look,
and
like-
Dad, we have to have a talk. We need to sit down. I need to talk about my new obsession.
I mean, literally, I had a fry cook job my freshman year of college, and I spent like easily most of my money from that on Transformers in the toy aisle of Walmart, because I was free. I could do whatever I wanted with my minimum wage, and I chose robots. But,
As somebody whose Pokemon card shipment from Amazon is on the porch right now, I'm not going to judge you.
That's fine. That's fine. So anyway, so like me reading this volume, I was just like, oh my god, I recognize all of these bots. I have so much affection for them. I'm all in on the characters. And so I recognize that it's kind of like the recent Star Wars show Ahsoka. And it was like people like me and Brian who have watched the 13 like animated seasons of Star Wars television were like, this is everything. I'm feeling every story beat. And people who didn't do that were like, what the hell is going on? And why do I care about this Ezra dude? And I'm like, good point. You don't. I care very deeply. So I'm getting that same vibe from Nick, just being like, what is happening here? And I'm just like, what do you mean? What is happening? I'm crying.
Don't you know?
What
This
do
is
you
pure
mean you don't
emotion
know?
over here.
Pure
This
emotion.
robot's dog just died.
So yes, like, oh my god, Soundwave just being sad over Ravage getting mauled, and like you see him carrying him around in the background, just try to be like, fix my robot cat. Like, come on. So yes, I'll like unable to separate my deep emotion for these characters from this. Like, I recently saw the new Transformers 1 movie, and I came out of that being like, this is cinema. This is the best movie of the year. And like, would a non-Transformers fan think that? No, they'd just be like, yes, that was entertaining. But I was just like, look at all my babies all on the screen.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the issue for me, going into this book and then reading it and then wrapping it up and sort of revisiting the same question was just um who is this book for, and is
Me.
it supposed to be new reader friend? Yeah. I mean, Kara, I should have looked at the last page, and maybe you were in the letters to the editor, or maybe there was a dedication on the inside cover. I missed it. I'm sure it was there. But if this book is, and maybe it's not supposed to be at all, if it's supposed to be new reader friendly, I don't look. It was almost certainly more new reader friendly than some of the things that IDW put out, where like IDW was very like up to their neck in Transformers canon,
I was
and
gonna
they
say
would be
canon
like,
heavy.
Right. And they're like, well, here's a new start, where people like are very disingenuously like, well, here's a good jumping on point. And it's like, is it really? Like, is it really a good jumping on point?
I've been hurt before.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like this phrase has no meaning at this point. But and this book for me, it's more approachable than some, but it also, like, I think right out of the gate, one of the things that would have helped fix this book for me, and probably would have driven other people fucking bonkers, is let's have less Transformers. Can we have a few less? Can we just have a few less to keep track of? Because I'll tell you one of the other things that drives me fucking insane, and I don't need the Transformers like imitating like hyper realistic speech patterns. But when you
Okay.
have 18 kajillion transformers, it means
Mm.
that every time one transformer addresses another transformer, they're going to slip their name in at some point. So
Mm.
it's like, you're right, Starscream. That is a good idea. And Jetfire, knowing that you, Starscream, want to destroy the Autobots, would really agree with me. Don't
Mm.
you, Starscream? And
Okay.
it's just,
First of all, Nick, no one has ever said Starscream, you're right.
yeah. Starscream was
Facts.
right.
Well, they actually say in this book several times, well, Megatron would do this differently, and
Yeah.
Starscream's reaction is to immediately punch them in the face because how dare you say Megatron's name? So if you're listening to this episode and you are not deep in Transformers lore, welcome and thank you. And Megatron is the head of the Decepticons, the bad guys, and Starscream is his second in command, eternally striving to be the first. And every time he gets the top spot, he fucks it up because he is a whiny little bitch and he's my favorite and I love him and I will
Yeah.
protect him at all costs, even though he is the one who murdered multiple humans in this comic. I understand this problem.
Yeah.
But so
he is a bitch affectionate.
so he's the leader of the Decepticons in this. We don't see Megatron until later in the volume. And
we get one shot of frozen Megatron.
One shot of frozen Megatron. Apparently he's doing stuff off camera, and I'll ask Nick about that in a second. But it is like for me personally, since Starscream is my favorite, this volume was such a gift to me personally because it is all about Starscream being a terrible leader and his like subordinates calling him out on it constantly and him pitching a temper tantrum every time this happens. And even though the Autobots, the good guys, are like less well equipped and like super damaged and like less of them have come back to life because the magic of space science, they're still able to kick his ass because he's doing everything like angrily and impulsively and from this place of like just terrible crushing impotence. It's a really rich text for us Starscream fans. But seeing that like one like money shot of Megatron or like the cliffhanger of him being encased in ice and he only has one arm, and you see like I did not catch that in the previous panel to this, Optimus Prime had attached Megatron's arm. There's a lot of missing arms in this series, very Star Wars.
I was going to say, I see why you two really, have a strong association with this series. There's a real connective tissue there, or lack of connective tissue.
A disconnected tissue.
Yeah. A cauterized tissue.
But anybody could enjoy watching Optimus Prime tear his own damaged arm off and beat a guy about the head with it.
Yeah, I appreciated that. That was fun.
Going back to my question for you, Nick, there were a few different moments in this volume where they were like, we're showing you a window into the rest of the Energon universe. Don't you want to buy and read the rest of the Energon universe? So my question is, do I want to, Nick? And how did this connect to the other series that you've read?
Yeah, that's the funny thing. Like this is the flagship book, and it might be my least favorite one of all of them, which is hilarious to me. That's endlessly funny to me. And I do want to say this: the art is great. Daniel Warren Johnson's art is great. Mike Spicer's colors are great, although they're very bright, and I think at some points it does create kind of a tonal discord when the book is trying to get darker and it still has that 80s color palette going on. But for me, this book has Deadly Class Syndrome, which is it's a wonderful, wonderful artist saddled on a 6 to 7 out of 10 prose book. And you could say, well, Nick, Daniel Warren Johnson is also doing the writing. Are you an idiot? No, I know that. I looked that up. I think what this is in some ways, and we can explore this later, is just, there are certain pressures that come with writing the flagship book. There are certain limits and guardrails that come up when you're writing an established franchise, one that now is running multiple books, one that is helmed by Skybound, and Robert Kirkman is at the top of the ladder. I mean, we could talk about how Star Wars books currently are being impacted canon-wise in terms of what they can and can't do, and I think there probably are some similar limitations on this series as where it can go and just how broadly it can paint outside the lines. But to answer your question, connective tissue. I think part of it for me is maybe in some ways I don't know enough to know what was connective tissue, but I
I've
will
got three
say
things.
it did have some correlation with Duke.
Yeah. Let me tell you the three things that I picked up on, either from context clues or from the letter column, because I was reading the single issues. One was, this was apparently the introduction of Duke to the Energon universe, because you see his little like name thing in like the one panel that he's in where he's like escaping Starscream.
Right.
Two was apparently Jetfire was in like the Robert Kirkman like 4-issue like prequel thing, something about a void or an abyss.
Void Rivals.
So apparently Jetfire was in that, and there was some allusion to like Megatron playing a role in the Cobra Commander book, maybe.
That's the only one I haven't read, so I can't speak to that one.
Nick.
Yeah.
Well, what about Void Rivals?
Well, I love Void Rivals. I absolutely love Void Rivals. I was heartbroken when I found out it was a Transformers book, honestly.
But did you like recognize Jetfire from Void Rivals into Transformers, and like that, did that make sense to you, or did you just over your head?
No, what happened when I saw him in Void Rivals was I said, "Oh, it's a fucking Transformer." And then when I saw him again in Transformers, I said, "Oh, it's another fucking Transformer." Yeah. And full credit to Kirkman. I'm sure most of the people on the show know this because we've talked about it before. Kirkman kept that a complete and utter secret, that he was backdooring Transformers into Void Rivals. Like, I never saw anything on Twitter, nothing on the comic interwebs, nothing in the rumor mill, nobody knew. They kept this 100% under wraps, which is bonkers to me in this day and age. So people finally got to what was maybe the third or fourth issue of Void Rivals, and suddenly, lo and behold, there's a Transformer.
And you're like, God damn it. And everyone else is like, oh, yeah.
Everyone else is like rubbing their hands together. And I'm like, fuck, I was really enjoying this book. What is this?
Isn't that kind of beautiful, though? Like, it's a Transformer book in disguise.
Perfect. We see what you did, Robert Kirkman.
Yes. But no, Void Rivals fucking rules. Like, for me, both Void Rivals and Transformers sort of touch on this idea of the futility of a drawn-out war over centuries, and the cost that like blind hatred can create between different groups, and the devastation. And it's kind of embarrassing because I feel like Void Rivals hits that on all cylinders, and then Transformers rolls in, and it's like, well, we've been fighting for like 200 years and it sucks, but like, we're not going to maybe show you much of that, or, really have you feel anything about it.
See, I would disagree. It's like, I thought that there were several points in this comic that talked about the futility of a long war, and how over time you just sort of become numb to it and wonder what you're even doing anymore.
That's the whole thing between Optimus and Sparky at the hospital, right?
Yeah, they're just like
they're talking about how long have you been at war.
So there's that moment. There's Cliffjumper having the moment where he could kill Starscream for murdering his family, and he's just like, I can't do it. I'm just fucking tired.
Because he's a coward.
Excuse you. He has been through a lot. These poor robots have been through so much trauma, Brian.
You're just glad Starscream survived.
I really am glad Starscream survived. All right. I mean, without him, he's like the terrible, morbid, entertaining engine that's driving this rig. All right. Like, we need him.
Every series needs an entertaining fail son. I've said it before.
It's so
I feel
true.
Like
deep sigh.
I feel like this book and the movies as well, like, Transformers show up, they interact with humans. Most rational humans are like, I don't want to go anything near this big weaponized bipedal hulk of metal. It does not seem like a rational, self-preservational thing to do. Some humans, Shia LaBeouf, think otherwise. Maybe that was a clue about Shia and being crazy. But
I'll ask you to leave Megan Fox out of this, Nick.
ultimately these people get drawn in. And
Hmm.
I'll tell you what, the Transformers universe is not a safe place to be a dad. It does not appear to be.
It's like the
If you're
opposite of
Sam's
a Disney
dad,
movie.
if you're Carly's dad, like this book is like Optimus Prime needs to be the father figure to all of these people, and so we need all of them to die. We need to find a way to kill all of the dads in this book.
I mean, that's actually a good point, because Sparky literally sacrifices his life so Optimus Prime can live and says to him, "Take care of my son." Like, it's not subtle. This is an overt messaging here.
He
And
was a
it's kind
side
of
father.
weird because he's not like the worst dad ever. Like at the beginning, they're like, this guy, maybe he drinks a little too much. Maybe he shows up at work a little late. Maybe he's got a little PTSD.
Late and drunk, Nick.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he seemed fine.
At the power plant, Nick. Like,
Isn't that every
on.
Simpsons episode?
I've seen like one episode of that show, but yes.
But
just like
he doesn't seem like the worst dad. And so when he has this, what I feel is supposed to be like a redemption moment, I'm like, you're not like a 2 out of 10 dad or something. Like, you're okay. I don't know why we're doing this.
But he feels like he's a disappointment. He says, he says. I teared up at that one too, Nick.
Okay, well,
I understand it was melodramatic, and I understand that it was the level of Titanic in terms of, we will drag these tears out of you. But it worked. I got emotional.
I also functionally didn't understand how a single human being is able to power a large robot.
Science, magic, Nick.
After this robot has been telling me for pages and pages that what he needs to live are Earth's natural resources, and then a human jumps inside him and dies, and apparently
Nick,
he's at 100% battery, let's do this.
Nick, sorry, I'm about to ruin this for everybody. So he stepped into the matrix of power, which is a power source that is tied into Optimus Prime's sense of being, or what his spark, the Transformers version. I was going to say,
this is all
but
spark
the matrix
bullshit,
of
right?
But the matrix of leadership can be passed from prime to prime, and it's more than just an energy source run on Energon. So when Sparky makes his sacrifice, he's stepping directly into the matrix of leadership, fueling it with his impassioned plea for safety on Earth and for his son. So it's not like a one-to-one energy transfer. It's like the symbolic meaning of the sacrifice is helping to bring the spark back to Optimus Prime. I agree it's bullshit. I'm just telling you that in the logic of the series, this is how it works.
It's bullshit, but it's internally consistent bullshit.
So are you saying that if the Autobots were able to line up more willing sacrifices from semi-okay people, that they could just power Optimus Prime indefinitely?
He's already fueled. No, he's already fueled. The matrix of leadership has been restored, and he himself has been restored, which just brings back the whole, like, our Transformers space vampires, because they seem pretty immortal unless you actually like really kill them. So
yeah, it does raise an interesting question. Like, could you form a religion based around sacrificing people to Transformers? Like,
yes,
Ryan,
and
that's
Megatron
exactly
would do
where
it.
I was going. Like, we welcome our new robot overlords, right?
Yep. If they wanted to be darker, they could take it there. It could become like the Cult of the Decepticons. That would be a pretty good horror title.
We'll talk about this after the show.
Bow and give tribute to this thing that looks like a cassette player, but it's not just a cassette player. How does Sony feel?
You and I can get our pitch going after this.
How does Sony feel that their name is attached to this evil doing, whatever it was? One of these bad guys. Maybe it was the mute one that loves cassette tapes or whatever. One of them had Sony written on them.
I did notice that. I mean, maybe they won't notice. I mean, they've noticed now that you pointed it out, but maybe they can argue it's fair use. I don't know how. It's a fictional representation.
Yeah, I wonder if they had like a branding deal back when the original Soundwave toy came out or something.
It did make me wonder, because then I was like, what's the little Transformer who chickens out on murdering people in cold blood.
Cliff
Cliff Jumper.
Right.
Excuse me.
So when he turned into a car, I was like, I wonder what other brands are in this, and I wonder how they feel about this, because apparently that's where my brain went. But
I mean, Bumblebee was originally a VW Bug. Like some of them, you do know their car brands, like Sideswipe and Sunstreak are colloquially known as the Lamborghini twins. Like Starscream and his Trine of Seekers are all like F-15 jets, I think. So it's all like actual stuff from the real universe. It's a good question. I've never considered that one before. Brian, you were coming in as a fairly neutral party on this. What are your impressions of this comic?
It's funny because I had a lot of the exact same thoughts as Nick. I just took them completely differently.
I just actually let them mature into better thoughts. And no,
Brian?
It's more like I also was like, I don't know which Transformer that is from looking at him.
Oh, God.
And just like, but what I took from that was, but it's still a Transformer. Like, I'm pretty sure it's a good guy, and I'm pretty sure it just like blew a giant hole in a bad guy. So fuck yeah, let's go.
And that goes back to my point about how not only do all the Transformers want to drop all of the names of all of the other Transformers all the time in conversation, but they also want to make it very clear all the time that, what side they're on, so if one of them says like all the Autobots must die or death to all the Autobots, it's like, well, okay, I might not really know who you are or what's going on, although I probably definitely know your name, but I know who you want to kill. And so that's a good baseline starting point.
One thing that I love that they kept from the 80s cartoon is the like over-the-top scene-chewing villain dialogue.
Oh, it's so melodramatic.
Like at one point, somebody calls Optimus self-righteous slime. Yeah. I was like, that's 80s, baby.
a true delight. I have some character and art specific points about this. Definitely one of my favorite moments in the series, like art wise, in terms of like representing an action or like an attack or a move, was Skywarp is one of the various jets that we've mentioned earlier. So it's generally Starscream, Thundercracker, and Skywarp. And Skywarp has his like special power is teleportation. So there's this one moment where he like does like a teleporting effect to like grab his arm like right next to I think Optimus Prime's face to like grab it. And the sound effect is like teleport in like two different panels. And I just thought it was really well done. And I was like, oh yeah, we're using teleportation already. And then like an issue later, or maybe even in that same issue, Starscream and Soundwave are literally like murdering Skywarp to use his parts to fix Teletran 1, the computer, so that Teletran 1 can like resuscitate the rest of the Decepticons. And I was kind of like, what are you doing? You had a teleporter. Like, why would the teleporter turn into scrap to fix the computer when he can teleport? Like, it really bothered me that this skill set was being dismantled intentionally.
That's why Starscream's a bad leader. He took a short-sighted path.
Terrible. To all of your points about there's so many robots and I don't know all their names. Late in the volume, we see the Constructicons, and they combine to form the Mega Robot, or Jet. I don't know how to pronounce his name because I've only seen it written, but a Gestalt or a Gestalt. It's like a German word that means like
Gestalt.
Things coming together. Thank you.
Yeah.
To create this giant robot Devastator. And I was like, hell yeah, Constructicons. What do you mean they're bringing out Devastator? But like, I'm sure for the two of you, you were like, Jesus Christ, who are there 6 of them and they all look the same and I have to worry about these guys now?
Yeah, but they were only individuals for like 3 panels, like in the total volume. So like, they're just Devastator to me.
Okay,
For me,
that's
it was
fair.
like, oh, this book's gonna go Power Rangers. That's fine. Or what was the other franchise that sort of did
Voltron.
that? Yeah,
Voltron.
yeah. I was like, oh, we're doing Voltron. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That works.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sure.
All right. So less
Um,
of an extreme reaction. And then, thinking of like me coming in already knowing who these characters were, like I wrote little notes to myself like, hell yeah, Wheeljack. Like Wheeljack is in like 3 panels of this and he's mostly dismembered and silent. But I was like, yeah, you brought back the nerdy inventor one because he needs to build the generator. This makes absolute sense. But I'm sure for the two of you, you were just like, I don't even we don't even, it doesn't matter. Like
I
move on.
didn't know that was a new guy. I just figured he had been here the whole time.
It's hard same. I was like, oh man.
Yeah, I mean, definitely they give the most screen time in terms of character development to Cliff Jumper, which is why I got to the end of this volume and I was like, is Cliff Jumper my new favorite? Because we do get to see him interacting with one of the humans and he's small. And so so the girl Carly has like, cute's probably the wrong word, but a cute little moment where she's just like, Cliff Jumper, you and I are very tiny. We are
Yeah.
going to get smushed by these big robots. We have to be smarter than the big robots. So
I this book truly achieved what I thought was impossible because I actually cared about the human characters.
gasp. Go
And
on.
after watching like the Michael Bay movies, like I didn't think that would ever happen because I could not give 2 fucks about Sam Witwicky. But for some reason, I was invested in the sacrifice of a man named Sparky.
Thank you.
Like,
It was emotional. It was melodramatic, but it was emotional.
what I want to know is how he figured out he could do that. Because it definitely is just like Optimus Prime puts the thing down, and Sparky is like walks over and is like, "Everybody gonna climb into this thing?" and then doesn't wait for an answer.
Do you want me to create an answer that sounds like it makes sense in the context of the universe? Because we could argue that the matrix of leadership called to him with the spirits of previous primes.
Yeah, I mean, we can say that. We can move on that.
Oh man. This is the comic book that brought me back into comic book stores. It was a brief moment because I realized I was accumulating the books and not actually reading them. So this was a great motivation for me to sit down and like actually read them. But for 8 months in a row, I did go to a comic book shop in person, religiously buy these books and buy other books also. So thank you, Transformers, for bringing me back into that space. That was lovely. Although now I wonder if I've maybe missed too many months and I do have to go back to trade waiting. This has become my new behavior.
Yeah, I mean, there's buying comics and there's reading comics. They're not the same thing.
Totally different hobbies. But other nice moments for me were like Soundwave as a character has this like very specific overly robotic like synthetic sounding voice that the other robots don't have, because I'm sure that would be like super annoying to watch as a children's cartoon if everyone talked like this all the time. So it's really only Soundwave that does that, and there's like a really nice lettering effect of Soundwave's dialogue being in like a blue box with like the letters slightly different. And so like reading those, I heard his voice and I was like, this is really well done. This is a nice touch.
Yeah. Shout out to the iconic Peter Cullen, whose voice I heard in my head whenever Optimus spoke and didn't even realize I was doing it until halfway through the volume.
No, it's like really good, just really distinct voice acting that was able to like come through if you knew that. But no, like this was a nice volume for me, like even just not being if it wasn't a Transformers volume, because there were a lot of really well done like cute little sound effects, excuse me. Whether it was Starscream splatting a human between his hands.
So good. I mean, so bad, but such an effective, like.
Well, yeah, you don't want to actually see the human being crushed, Nick. The deer was enough. The deer got memed. Like, we don't want to do that to the corpse of a human.
To Carly's father. Oh no, sorry. This is the jet pilot. Carly's dad just got like fist crushed.
Yeah. But very effective use of sound effects, even the like, yeah one that bothered Nick later in the volume.
I'm glad you brought up teleport because I was going to if you hadn't.
No, that was a really good one. Yeah, this was just overall with like the pacing. I had a different reaction to Nick saying, "What is the tone of this?" My reaction was more, I'm going from intense fight scene to emotionally intense story beat. Like there was no breather. So reading this all at once, I was really just like, oh, I need a minute. Like, I have mostly consumed Transformers fan fiction over like canon Transformers stuff. And when like you're reading fan fiction, you're reading like you have the option to read these like quieter moments that don't drive plot, which is why they don't get written into shows like this. So I was really yearning for, I realized like most of my exposure to Transformers is like the Autobots just came back from patrol and they're hanging out at the Ark and sipping cubes of Energon, and maybe those two over there are gonna hook up. It's not like, now we have an emotionally intense murder scene. So I found myself just really yearning for like, I really wish these Autobots could like have a beat where they could just like have a drink and like decompress from the events of the day. Like if this keeps going like full strength, I don't know if my heart can take it.
Volume 2 just subtitled, "Can a bitch get a break?"
I mean, I know.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I know I'll continue reading eventually if I can figure out which volumes I need to get, which issues I need to get a hold of. And I am curious to explore some more of the Energon universe, but I don't know. It doesn't sound like Nick will keep reading, and Brian, it sounds like perhaps this would be a moment of convenience.
I think that if they ever put out like a big like Energon universe collected edition,
Mm-hmm.
I would probably want to check that out because I do want to see how all these stories tie together, but I don't want to run around collecting 9 different volumes and trying to figure out how they link together.
Mm-hmm.
Marvel has forever soured me on crossovers like that.
Oh yeah.
I part of me feels like, and we'll see, right? Because obviously Daniel Warren Johnson returns for writing volume 2, but he does not handle art duties in volume 2, which, you know, some people may feel differently about that. I'm willing to allow for the fact that some of my gripes in this book may be a lot of the typical foundation setting issues that come with volume 1s. You don't see as many of those in, for example, like a lot of the Image like hit the ground running books these days, where like you've got to set things in place and you've got to get things moving and you've got to really, get things off to a quick start. And I feel like this series with Kirkman's backing, and it's the Transformers franchise, like it's allowed to sort of take its time and really set the scene however it wants, and clearly it does. And maybe once the foundation has been set, things will get a little bit less, I hate to say it because I'm sure some readers want this, like maybe a little less hectic, because this with this book, like the stakes are just so high all the time, and it's either people monologuing or evil monologuing or being a quippy sidekick. And
But I love my quippy sidekicks, Nick.
it's clearly there's an audience for this book, obviously.
It's me.
Right.
I'm the audience.
I am terrified to go to the last page in this book and like find like a full-fledged like 4-paragraph dedication to you that I just skipped over. Oh man. Yeah, there's special tribute section.
It's somehow a picture from this recording. Like,
God.
It's just like the freeze frame of me turning beet red in the first 2 minutes of this episode.
But I will probably return. I think I've I've already probably bought the issues, to be honest, if I went to bother and look and check. But
you had the same problem. Just buy it all, read it eventually.
I've already made the down payment. Yeah. It's a sunk cost, folks. But I would at least encourage people check out some of the other stuff, especially check out Void Rivals.
Well, I was going to say, what do you recommend for going from here?
Void Rivals is really great. How much will it add to your Transformers experience? So far, not much, but it feels like we're, these two books are going to collide soon enough, real soon. But I love it, and it's got Lorenzo De Felici on art, who previously worked with Kirkman on his book Oblivion Song a couple of years ago, and just a wonderful it's not a for everyone art style, but I think it's great. I enjoyed Duke. Interestingly, that book kind of collides with this book because if I'm remembering correctly, like Duke is obviously like very traumatized at the beginning because of the events that take place in Transformers 1 or whatever that was, and that sort of is that's like the beginning of Duke. And beyond that, I'm liking Scarlet. I'm enjoying Scarlet. I think that book's great. And Destro appears to be a book for the lore heads because I am
lost,
having a hard time with that one. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
He's talking about his family history and trying to explain why he wears a metal mask all the time because it's actually fused to his face.
And since it's not an 80s cartoon, you have to explain why you have a metal face.
Ooh, yeah, right. Right. Nobody asked questions back then. You could have a metal face and nobody would say a thing.
Oh, man. Yeah, I'm definitely like less up on my G.I. Joe lore. Like the extent of my G.I. Joe lore was watching the movie with Channing Tatum in it. No, not the one with Channing Tatum. Yes, the one with Channing Tatum. It came out in like 2010 or something like that. And it was The Rise of Cobra. And I remember it so vividly because I'm about to sound like an asshole. It takes place in the city of Paris, and I had just returned from a study abroad in Paris. So watching the film, knew that they were doing a car chase in circles around the Eiffel Tower to get the shots of it constantly in the background. And I was like, this makes no sense. I can believe this story about these elite commandos fighting a paramilitary, like extra national organization, but I do not believe the logic of this car chase through the streets of Paris.
So I thought you were going to say that they obviously weren't in Paris the same way like every CW show of whatever city it is Vancouver.
See, I figured Kara just, came back from study abroad, and like every obligatory, returned from study abroad, it was, did you know I went on study abroad? Here's where I went on study abroad.
Nick,
and Kara was like, this is what I did on my trip, and then just shows the full movie to people.
No, mine was better / worse because like I went as part of my like French major. I was doing the language, so I came back like any remotely French word for the next like 5 years. I would do my best to pronounce like with the best possible like Parisian French accent.
Yeah.
And some of my friends did not appreciate that. They were like, yeah, we know you studied abroad. I'm like, yeah, there was a lot of money that went into me getting this accent. I'm going to use it. Like, come on.
You're going to get croissants whether you want them or not. So stop talking about it.
Exactement. Très bien, Nick. But yeah, no, this is delightful. For other Transformers comics, it's difficult to recommend them because they're so fucking impossible to get a hold of Transformers backlist for whatever reason. Because like the go-to for like if you don't know anything about Transformers but you like character-driven stories and like decent plots is to recommend Transformers More Than Meets the Eye. But you like can't get it anywhere. So it's like I can't recommend it. But like, if you do somehow have access to more than meets the eye, do that one. And some of the miniseries that IDW did were like, if they followed like one specific character, I think those are easier to get into than the bigger series, because you have one focus and they generally focus on a character with like a distinctive like visual look. Like, I'm thinking off the top of my head about like the Drift miniseries, because he was like, they were like, let's make a new character and let's make him a lone samurai with a giant sword who's morally gray. And I was like, yes.
Sold.
And they made
I am a 13-year-old boy and I approve.
And there I laugh because that is actually how I described most of my taste in college. I was just like, yes, I'm a 12-year-old boy, thank you for noticing. But they did they introduced another new character. I feel like there are gender is such an interesting concept in the Transformers universe, because they're non-biological extraterrestrials. They're robots. Like, it's bold of us to ascribe a binary gender to them based off of human genders. But there are a few girl ones, quote unquote. And a newer addition to the girl one lineup is Windblade. And Windblade is like very heavily like different. They basically like threw a bunch of like Asian cultures in a blender and said, give us Windblade. She uses fans and has like very like specific like geisha inspired makeup on her face, even though it's not actually makeup. And it's anyway.
Oh boy.
So
oh boy.
It's not it's would they have made these choices a decade later? Probably not, but they made them when they did, and she's pretty cool. It's just like and honestly, I would say if people like want to get into the Transformers and don't know where to start, I'm so serious. Watch Transformers 1. They do a really good job of like doing scene setting on Cybertron, the planet that they're from. You're watching Optimus and Megatron going from like who they were before they were these leaders of these factions to becoming those leaders. It's very well done. The radicalization of Megatron, like the political radicalization, I went into this all ages robot movie being like, I'm gonna watch a Transformers movie, and I came out being like, did I really want to see the political radicalization of somebody who's going to now like cause harm to his fellow humans? Probably not. Or not humans, robots, you get it. But that's a really good starting point. And they had a good mix of like, there are so many robots, but you only really focus on like 4 of them, so you get time with their personalities. I, for one, am so pleased with so there is a girl one in this one, Alita 1, who I thought was RC for a while, because both Alita 1 and RC are pink and white, because those are the girl colors. But yeah. So, but I think Scarlett Johansson is the voice of this Alita 1, and she has a really great speech like halfway through the movie where she's having like a get it together moment with our lead hero. And she just looks at him and she's like, I am better than you in every possible way. And I was just like, say it louder for the men in the back. Like, I don't know. It was just like, that was like my version of the America Ferrera speech in Barbie. It was really cathartic to hear, even though it was like in this robot movie. Anyway, I love the Transformers. Join me in loving the Transformers. It's really fun until it's obnoxious, like when you have to try to get Brian and Nick to love them too in less than an hour.
I think you did a pretty good job, though.
Thanks.
I don't know if I would say I love the Transformers, but I'm definitely Transformer positive.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it.
I would recommend to people, honestly, it's such a weird, out there, but self-contained. Just go read Transformers vs. G.I. Joe by Tom Scioli.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is tonally like the characters take themselves so seriously, but Tom Scioli definitely does not take this book, crazy seriously, and the art's amazing, and I think what's hilarious is that you're overwhelmed because they introduce every single character. Like, they'll introduce 20 or 30 new characters in like one panel of a book, and like you never see them again, but they're all there, and it's just pure overwhelming insanity, but it's hilarious in that way. It's like, I don't know who any of these tons of people are, but that's fine. We're moving on to the next thing. Amazing book. Amazing book.
And I'll recommend that you go watch Pacific Rim.
Yes. Very nice, Brian. I mean, the robots aren't sentient, but I guess we can allow it.
Yeah, Transformers adjacent.
Cool. Well, if nobody has any closing thoughts, I think that's a great place to wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Nick and Kara, for joining me. Thank you to Kate for proof listening. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.